Coming up next, we're counting down the top 10 songs from one of the greatest years in music history, including the story of two massive artists, a band and a singer, who released singles at the exact same time with identical riffs. They both swear it was pure coincidence, but did somebody rip somebody off? Find out next the real story. Then there's the tale of a young singer who was so blown away by a guitarist's performance that he actually broke up his current band on the spot. He tracked down the axeman's address and he showed up at his door dressed like David Bowie with a Les Paul and a notebook. They shook hands and a legendary partnership was born that put hard rock on the map, plus the haunting ballad written as a tribute to a Hollywood legend that was never released as a single. But then years later, new lyrics were written to the original music, and it became the fastest selling song ever. And then there's the classic song that was written after a Beatle made an offhand remark that a famous hard rock band couldn't write a good ballad. And finally, a no-hit wonder who never had a hit in America, but somehow sold 145 million records and had one that was on the charts for 18 years. It's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies. Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember this, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now to be a part of our Music History Daily straight from the artist. So today we're diving into one of the most remarkable years in rock history, 1973. This was a year when the charts were dominated by pop hits and soft rock ballads, but lurking beneath the surface were some of the most groundbreaking album tracks ever recorded. These were songs that missed the top 40 but are now bigger than the #1 hits of that year. Remember, this was an incredible year. From southern rock anthems to epic prog masterpieces, from glam rock riffs to reggae grooves, 1973 was loaded with iconic songs that were even bigger than the hits. So actually I had to do a new recording here of the intro because in the middle of this countdown, as I was recording it, I had a massive pain that I had to go to the emergency room. I find out I have a 40 millimeter kidney stone, if you can believe that. It's one of the biggest kidney stones that the doctor said, and they're going to have to do surgery. So I'm going to get through this the best I can. Through the pain, we count down the hits. All right, starting things off at number 10, we have Love Rain O'er Me by The Who. Out of the 60s and into the 70s, The Who had already conquered arenas with Tommy. They'd revolutionized synthesizer rock with Who's Next and established themselves as one of the most explosive live acts on planet Earth. But the year 1972 had been the least active for the band since forming, with members pursuing solo projects and rumors of a split were swirling. The band needed something big to follow up their massive triumphs. Enter, of course, Quadrophenia, their ambitious double-album rock opera released in October of '73. And closing out this epic journey was a song that would capture one of rock's most dramatic, creative collisions, Love Rain O'er Me. Of course, Pete Townsend wrote the track as a tender spiritual piece. On his demo, he sang it gently, intending to represent a character having the most awful day of his life. The song's central metaphor of rain, that came directly from the teachings of Townsend's spiritual master, Meher Baba. Baba actually once commented that rain was a blessing from God and thunder was God's voice. Within Quadrophenia's story, the protagonist Jimmy is in the midst of a personal crisis. He's very depressed, and this song becomes his plea to be drowned and cleansed by life-giving rain, a spiritual surrender. But Roger Daltrey had other ideas. When Daltrey got into the studio, he completely transformed the song. He saw it as a chance to inject raw, street-level passion, turning Townsend's spiritual meditation into what he described as a primal, explosive release of emotion. Townsend was initially shocked by Daltrey's powerful dramatic interpretation, and he dismissed it at first. It was only after engineer Ron Nevison convinced him to give it a chance that Townsend came to appreciate Daltrey's take. Love Rain O'er Me was released on October 27, 1973, but it stalled at number 76 on the Billboard Hot 100. Kicking off the countdown at number 9, I've got Montrose with Bad Motor Scooter. When Ronnie Montrose formed his self-titled band in 1973, he was already an established guitarist. He played on Van Morrison's albums Tupelo Honey and St. Dominic's Preview, notably on the hit Wild Night. He was also a member of the Edgar Winter Group, enjoying commercial success with hits like Frankenstein and Free Ride. But Ronnie left Winter's band specifically to orchestrate his own project. His band featured a powerful combination. There's Ronnie on lead guitar and a young unknown Sammy Hagar on lead vocals. The rhythm section consisted of Bill Church on bass and Denny Carmassi on drums. Their self-titled 1973 debut album Montrose would serve as the primary launchpad for both Montrose and Hagar's legendary careers. Now, produced by Ted Templeman, who would later become famous for producing Van Halen's iconic early albums, Bad Motor Scooter's revving motorcycle guitar intro wasn't a pre-planned masterpiece. It's actually a last-minute studio improvisation that almost wasn't captured on tape. As the story goes, the band and Templeman felt the song was missing a crucial hook. Guitarist Ronnie Montrose stumbled upon the sound while experimenting with a slide and a fuzz box in the studio, using an open D tuning to create the now famous effect. In a moment of high drama, Templeman and engineer Don Landy initially missed recording the take because they failed to get the recording tape rolling in time. Now, thankfully, they had him do it again, and it worked, and a classic rock staple was born, but it was touch and go for a second there. The Red Rocker later claimed that this was the first song that he ever wrote in his life. It's part of a batch of 4 songs he wrote upon first meeting Ronnie. The story of their meeting is legendary. Hagar had seen Montrose perform with Edgar Winter at Winterland, and he was so blown away by that performance, he actually broke up his soul band on the spot. And then he tracked down Ronnie's address in Sausalito, and he showed up at his door dressed like David Bowie. He had these big high-heeled platform shoes, the satin pants, probably had makeup on with a Les Paul and a notebook pad is what he said. And he played him those 4 songs. They shook hands, and Ronnie said, let's start a band. Within a month, they were signed to Warner Brothers Records, and the first Montrose album was born a month after that. Said Hagar, "It was the fastest thing I've ever done in my life. I went from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye, all because of Ronnie." Now, although Bad Motor Scooter didn't place on the Billboard Hot 100, the influence of that first Montrose album cannot be overstated. When Eddie Van Halen first met Hagar around 1977, he told him, "I'm a Montrose freak. I love the band." And Ted Templeman later revealed that when he signed Van Halen, he took the first Montrose record into the studio and said, "Boom. We're going to have 8 great songs. They're going to be this long. They're going to be this tempo." And essentially, he patterned the whole thing after it. They were called America's answer to Led Zeppelin. And here's what Sammy told me about it.
I fell into the Montrose lap, and then I started that band and shook hands. I said, "I got a drummer." He said, "I got a bass player, Bill Church," and I had Denny Carmassi. And next thing I know, I was making a record and going on tour, and I haven't stopped since. The future's in the skies above.
Tell me about that first time going out on tour. What was that like?
Oh man, I couldn't even sleep. We shared rooms. So Denny Carmassi and I had a room, and Bill Church and Ronnie had a room for a while. Then we got tired of each other, and we started switching it up. But actually, the thought of staying in the cheapest hotel, the most flea bag, filthy place you could find, and every night doing a show, 7 nights a week, no days off. Driving in a station wagon, all of us with a tour manager who was a tour manager, lighting director, sound guy, everything. And it was just, and one truck driver, one little truck, long story short, I guess, is that I loved it. We weren't making any money. We were getting $10 a day per diem. That's all we had to eat. And I was the happiest guy in the world.
All right, coming in at number 8, we're heading to the South with Lynyrd Skynyrd and Tuesday's Gone. Tuesday's gone with the wind. With the release of their debut album, pronounced Lynyrd Skynyrd, Lynyrd Skynyrd were on the cusp of something truly massive. The first-time record was about to introduce the world to a new breed of Southern rock. Led by the iron-fisted Ronnie Van Zant, this band from Jacksonville, Florida was incredibly well-rehearsed. Their musical discipline was borderline obsessive. But behind that professional polish was a band that had clawed their way up from nothing, playing small bars and rehearsing in a swamp-like shed they called Hell House in rural Georgia. Now, it was in that ramshackle rehearsal space where Tuesday's Gone was born. The song's opening line, train roll on down the line. Train roll on. That was pulled straight from real life. Trains would rumble past their shed, the sound bleeding into their practice sessions, and that ambient noise, that feeling of something moving on down the tracks while they were standing still, that sparked the theme that would define the entire song. Now, co-written by Alan Collins and Ronnie Van Zant, Tuesday's Gone became the second track on their debut album. It's a song about love lost, about moving on when it all hurts, about accepting that sometimes the best thing you can do is let that train roll on. Tuesday's Gone wasn't your typical Skynyrd track, though. It was a softer, more melancholic, and it featured Al Kooper's haunting mellotron strings. For a gritty southern rock band, it was a bold choice. But here's the thing. Tuesday's Gone was never released as a single in 1973, so it never had a shot at the Hot 100. Give Me 3 Steps and Freebird were both given single status, but Tuesday wasn't meant to be. Although it would become an undisputed Skynyrd standard, Tuesday's Gone was a classic album cut through and through. Coming in at number 7, I've got David Bowie's Jean Genie. Now, stepping back to 1972, David Bowie was catapulted to international stardom with the release of The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Stacked with classic cuts like Starman, Suffragette City, and Ziggy Stardust. The LP was the first to certify gold here in the US, claimed a number 21 on the Billboard 200. And things were looking even brighter on Bowie's home turf in the UK. But with success came pressure. Bowie's label RCA demanded an immediate follow-up. Producer Ken Scott confirmed this, saying, and I quote, "There was a lot of pressure because record companies back then demanded an album every 6 months. So Bowie did the impossible. He wrote and recorded Aladdin Sane on the road during the frantic Ziggy Stardust tour. The lead single from that whirlwind session was the Jean Genie, a smorgasbord of Imagine Americana, shaped by Bowie's intense first major U.S. tour. It's like a man, but he smiles like a reptile. She loved him, she loved him. The title has long been taken as an allusion to the author Jean Genet, which Bowie said was subconscious but true. In late 1972, Bowie released the Jean Genie, and just weeks later, the band Sweet, who was also on RCA, they released Blockbuster. Both songs were built around a powerful Bo Diddley-inspired guitar riff, and both shot up the UK charts, creating confusion and accusations of copycat ripoffs. Andy Scott, Sweet's guitarist, recalled the moment they discovered the clash. Actually, a label executive at RCA played them Bowie's new single, and he said, "That's the same guitar riff." I was horrified. The bands and songwriters maintained that it was an absolute coincidence, with both riffs independently inspired by the Yardbirds cover of Bo Diddley's I'm a Man. In a dramatic chart upset, though, Sweet's Blockbuster went to number 1 in the UK, edging out the Jean Genie, which made it to number 2. It was one of the most insane weeks in chart history. 2 iconic artists with essentially the same song in the top 2 spots. But here's where the story gets really good. The tension was reportedly diffused when David Bowie met Sweet's co-writer Nicky Chin. He looked him dead in the eye and he said, well, I can't say it on here. I can't even spell it on here. Yeah, he called him a see you next Tuesday, and then he hugged him and said, congratulations. Here in the US, a Jean Genie didn't come close to its UK success. It actually peaked at number 72, but what a classic. Jean Genie, let yourself go. All right, coming in at number 6, I've got a true classic from Bob Marley and the Wailers with Stir It Up. Bob Marley was, of course, no stranger to Jamaica's music scene, but in the early 70s, he was still virtually unknown internationally. Now, that all changed with their major label debut on Island Records, Catch a Fire. This was a calculated crossover move designed to introduce Bob Marley to rock audiences around the world. And while tracks like Concrete Jungle captured the gritty realities of Kingston streets, Stir It Up stood out as something altogether different, a warm and sensual groove. origins of this track actually predate the album by 6 years. Back in 1967, just a year into his marriage with Rita, Bob penned the song as an intimate love letter to his wife. Originally cut as a rock-steady single, it was a coded message of affection that most of the world would never hear, at least not yet. When the Wailers finally re-recorded it for Catch a Fire, the track became the album's beating heart, a softer counterpoint to the rest of the record's social commentary and revolutionary fire. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Before Marley ever had a global platform, American singer Johnny Nash discovered the song and took it straight to U.S. radio.
Just me and you, come on and steer it up.
Nash's smooth cover version climbed to number 12 on the Hot 100 in the spring of 1973, becoming a genuine hit. Some music historians have argued that Nash's success with Bob's composition was crucial, as it paved the way for the Wailers' Island Records era that followed. Nash built the bridge between Kingston and mainstream pop, and Bob would soon walk across it. However, Stir It Up, the 1973 re-recorded Bob Marley version, was released and never made it to the Billboard Hot 100. But then again, none of Bob Marley's songs were ever hits in America. Yeah, that's right, Bob Marley wasn't a one-hit wonder. He was a no-hit wonder. Yet his greatest hits album has sold 25 million copies and spent 18 years on the charts, second longest only to Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon. Bob Marley has sold almost 150 million records and he never had a hit. It's just insane. So halfway through the countdown at number 5, I've got the piano player from England, Elton John with Candle in the Wind. By October 1973, Elton John was a bona fide superstar. The flamboyant piano man had exploded onto the scene in 1970 with his self-titled album and his hit song, Your Song.
Hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I put down.
Of course, he hasn't slowed down since. With his lyricist and creative partner, Bertie Taupin, Elton had crafted a string of massive albums, Man Man Across the Water, Honky Chateau, and Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, each one climbing higher in the charts than the last. Now, by 73, Elton was selling out arenas and dominating radio.
You're my brother, you are older than me.
He was on an absolute tear, and his next album would prove to be his masterpiece. The album, of course, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, a sprawling double LP packed with hits. Tucked away on side 4 was a haunting ballad called Candle in the Wind. Bertie Taupin wrote the lyrics with Marilyn Monroe in mind, imagining her as a symbol of celebrities destroyed by fame. He later said the song could have been about any young star who died too soon. It could have been about James Dean, it could have been about somebody else. MCA Records originally planned to release Candle in the Wind as the third single from Yellow Brick Road. But then something unexpected happened. American radio started playing Benny and the Jets, and listeners went crazy for it.
Benny and the Jets.
Elton didn't think Benny should be a single at all. He thought it was just a little too funky, a little too left field. But MCA pivoted, issuing Benny and the Jets as the A-side. Candle in the Wind got shelved. Here's the thing, though. It got released as a live album track in the late 80s. And then the song got a second win decades later, with the lyrics rewritten when the song was performed just one time. And this non-hit became the biggest selling single in music history.
You lived your life like a candle in the wind.
In August of 97, Princess Diana died in a car crash in Paris and the world went into mourning. Elton, who had been a close friend of Diana's, was asked to perform at her funeral. And with Bernie's blessing, they rewrote the lyrics in a single hour, replacing Marilyn with Diana and capturing that heartbreak of a planet in grief.
You've lived your life like a candle in the wind.
Released as a double A-side single with Something About the Way You Look Tonight, what happened next was truly unexpected and unprecedented. In the UK, it sold 1.5 million copies in its first week. In the US, it moved 3.5 million copies in a single week, the fastest selling single in history, debuting at number 1 where it stayed for 14 weeks. The 1997 version transformed Candle in the Wind from a forgotten album track into a global moment, raising millions for Diana's charities, selling over 33 million copies.
May you ever grow in our hearts, you were the great.
And And like I said, out of respect for her memory, Elton has never performed the song again. Did it one time. It's crazy. Coming in at number 4, I'm taking a big chance here by covering these guys because we know what happens when you cover these guys. Got Eagles with Desperado.
Desperado, why don't you?
Released in April of '73, Eagles' second album was a bold Western-themed concept record built around the Doolin Dalton gang, a metaphor for life in a rock band. At its core was the haunting title track, one of the Eagles' most iconic songs.
But I know that you got your reasons.
Don Henley began writing Desperado in the late 60s when he was only 17 years old. But it took shape after Eagles' debut when Glenn Frey heard it and helped structure it, launching their legendary songwriting partnership. Originally written for a friend named Leo, but Jackson Browne suggested a Western angle, transforming Leo into the lone cowboy Desperado.
You've been out riding fences.
Beneath its surface story of a hardened outlaw lies a reflection of the band's own struggles with fame and isolation. Recording was tense. Producer Glenn Johns gave Henley only 2 takes, backed by a bored London Philharmonic Orchestra.
Now it seems to me some fine things.
Though it wasn't released as a single, Linda Ronstadt's 1973 cover brought attention to it.
Desperado, why don't you?
And its inclusion on Eagles' 1976 greatest hits cemented its status alongside Take It Easy in Hotel California.
Better let somebody love you.
All right, heading into the number 3 spot, I've got ZZ Top with LaGrange.
But the shack outside LaGrange.
So funny story, we covered this about a year and a half ago. And when I told the real story of it, this video got taken down for saying a word that you can't say on this platform, even though it's describing a real historical location or real thing. So again, I got to tiptoe around this one. We'll see where we get. LaGrange is a tribute to a real-life Texas establishment that was a chicken ranch. This establishment operated illegally from 1905 to 1973. The name Chicken Ranch originated in the 1930s when during the Great Depression, clients could trade chickens, poultry, for carnal favors, desires, whatever you want to call it. I can't say it on here, which were then used for food and sold for extra income. For tax purposes, the business fronted as a poultry farm. This place had a long-standing agreement with local politicians and law enforcement who turned a blind eye to its operations. It was frequented by lawmen and politicians and became a local institution. Miss Jessie, who opened this place in 1905, and later Miss Edna, who purchased it in 1961, maintained a certain level of respectability and even contributed to local charities. ZZ Top members Billy Gibbons, Dusty Hill, and Frank Beard all admitted to visiting this chicken ranch. They considered it a rite of passage. Gibbons wrote the lyrics and composed the music for LaGrange, which appeared on the band's third LP, Tres Hombres. The music of LaGrange boasts an irresistible groove, wicked change-ups, and killer guitar solos. This whole thing stemmed from an instrumental jam session and was heavily influenced by the boogie blues rhythm of John Lee Hooker. A lot of people say they ripped it off, but I don't think so. The release of LaGrange brought significant attention to the Chicken Ranch, ultimately leading to its closure by Governor Dolph Briscoe in 1973. This was also due to the efforts of Marvin Zindler, a crazy TV reporter who exposed this place, leading to a confrontation with local sheriff Jim Florney. Despite its closure, the legend of the Chicken Ranch lives on as the song has been featured in movies like Armageddon and has been covered by a number of artists and, of course, was in the Dolly Parton movie that I can't even say on here.
Y'all come back now, you hear?
The main house of the Chicken Ranch was later relocated and reopened as a restaurant in Dallas in 1977 with Miss Edna serving as a hostess. LaGrange just missed the top 40 at number 41 on the Hot 174. Still, this song's immortal guitar riff and that infectious groove has made it one of ZZ Top's most recognizable tracks, one of the best songs in classic rock history. The song did better on rock radio. LaGrange became a classic rock radio staple. And so, technically missed the top 40, but it had the last laugh, outlasting most of the songs that hit number one that year for sure. All right, we're almost to the end of the countdown, and coming in at number 2, I've got a special one. I got Led Zeppelin with a Rain Song.
It is the springtime of my love.
The Rain Song originated as a direct response to a comment that Beatle George Harrison made to John Bonham. He said that Zeppelin needed to balance their sets with some softer numbers. His exact words, I guess, were this: "The problem with you guys is you never do ballads." When Jimmy Page caught wind of that remark, he said to himself something to the effect of, "I'll give him a ballad. I'll show him what I can do." So while working in his new home studio, Page wrote the Rain Song.
You are the sunlight in my growing.
Pointing directly at Harrison, he even inserted 2 chords from George's own ballad Something into the intro as a little dig. Musically, the Rain Song is a masterclass in atmosphere. John Paul Jones layers in the Mellotron synthesizer, the same groundbreaking instrument that Beatles used on Strawberry Fields Forever. They really took it to them and showed that they could produce a ballad as well as anyone. Despite its notoriously imprecise response times, Jones coaxed magic from the machine. Meanwhile, John Bonham traded his signature thunder for brushes, delivering one of the most creative and delicate performances of his career. Even when the song builds 5 minutes in, Bonham kept the brushes going, striking harder with their lower ends to achieve a powerful yet really nuanced sound. Robert Plant considered the Rain Song one of his finest vocal moments, showcasing his growth as a singer who could wield both restraint and power. Lyrically, Robert Plant uses the metaphor of passing seasons to chart a love story, moving from the springtime of my loving through the summer of my smiles into the coldness of my winter. It's pure jukebox poetry, I'm telling you. The Rain Song, it was never released as a single. It should have been. Zeppelin, they were an albums band, of course, through and through, building their empire on LP sales and stadium shows. Houses of the Holy did produce one U.S. single, Over the Hills and Far Away. That reached number 51. But, with its 8-minute runtime and its orchestral scope, the Rain Song, it was just too ambitious for top 40 radio in 73. It's just never going to happen. If they would have edited it down, I think it could have been a top 10 hit. The Rain Song was meant to be experienced as part of the Houses of the Holy journey. Set between The Song Remains the Same and Over the Hills. For fans who took that journey, though, the Rain Song became one of Zeppelin's most cherished deep cuts and proved to the Beatles that they could out-ballad even them. All right, we're to the number 1 spot, and I'm telling you, this one was easy. I can't believe this wasn't a top 40 hit. I've got Pink Floyd with Time.
Taking away the moments that make up a dull day.
Time's inspiration came from Roger Waters' epiphany at age 29, realizing he had been wasting his life preparing instead of living. This realization led him to ponder what truly mattered in life, which in turn led to the genesis of The Dark Side of the Moon. Waters took on the role of primary lyricist, aiming for more lucid and straightforward lyrics here, moving away from the whimsy of Syd Barrett. The band met together in November of 71, and Waters had a second epiphany, envisioning The Dark Side of the Moon as a conceptual album addressing universal themes like mortality and conflict and money and mental instability. As for Time, it opens with a 2+ minute intro featuring an exploding sonic collage of ringing alarms, chimes, and bells, and this is followed by a spacey metronome-like heartbeat.
The origins of that are fairly interesting. I mean, I had recorded all these clocks for a sound effects recording, commissioned by EMI, and we never really got much exposure. So I offered that to the guys, and the original producer of that sound effects record said, "Yeah, no problem." And so we recompiled and remixed and retimed all these clocks. Ticking and chiming at the right moment.
The song laments the wasting of life's most valuable commodity, time. As it progresses, Roger Waters takes us on a profound journey, measuring out our lives in hours, days, and years that add up to a lifetime before we even realize what's happened. Brilliant poetry here. The lazy days of youth drift by in slow motion, but are suddenly gone in the blink of an eye.
10 years have gone behind.
And in their place is the realization that this life is finite and it's fleeting. As the song comes to an end, Roger Waters just cuts it all off with the line, "The time is gone, the song is over. Thought I'd something more to say."
I'd something more to say.
He mimics Death's abrupt arrival there. It's brilliant. Time never had a shot at the top 40 because Pink Floyd just didn't release it as a single. The band famously avoided the singles game, believing that their albums should be experienced as a complete artistic statement. The Dark Side of the Moon was all about the album experience, not individual tracks, of course. The only single that they pulled from this masterpiece was Money. It climbed to number 13 on the Hot 100 in the summer of '73. But Time, the best song on the album, it lived and breathed exclusively on the LP. It became the second album here on this countdown that spent 18 years plus on the charts without having a massive hit single. But it's such a brilliant song, just like Rush with Tom Sawyer. Both of these songs should have been number one hits. We give it the number one hit today. All right, that's our countdown. What is your top 10 of 1973? So this is a chance for you guys to vote with your view. We've done a few of these countdowns and they haven't done as well. I'm thinking about stopping. This may be our last non-hit countdown. Let me know what you think below. Should we continue to do these things? Let us know. And until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.